that he throws
All
in
right.
there if you want to start thinking about it.
Good to know.
Right.
Yeah. And then we get into the stuff. Oh, and then he looks for closing remarks, by the way, too, if you have any thoughts, if we have time. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. But otherwise, it's the bits that people raise. It's the more interesting bit.
Helpful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We can.
Very good.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm.
That's it. Yep.
Yep. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Symes, and most of my professional background has been in HR in the tech industry, but now I'm also advising, so basically SMEs across any industry on their HR strategy and operations. It's great to be with you today. My top do's and don'ts, I think, would be just thinking about getting really crisp on a mission and purpose. I think that's really important at the beginning. And also identifying the skills that you're really looking for. Anyway, I'll hand over now to the next person.
Hi, I'm Lucy O'Brien. I've spent 18 or so years in executive search and in-house talent acquisition. The last 3 years I've spent with 8 Roads, which is a global venture capital firm. We started out in Boston 50 years ago. Today, fast forward a number of years, and we've got 11 billion of assets around the world, and invested in 450 companies, 60 of which IPOs. My role was created 3 years ago to support our portfolio companies with the how as they build their leadership teams post-investment, and that's where I spend my time today. I would say my top tip would be nailing your first hires being crucial for the growth of your business, and don't overhire, don't hire too soon, bring in what you need until you get to the next inflection point. And handing over to the next.
Margaret? Maybe she's having some difficulty. Do you want me to just go ahead and go, Anton, until she plugs in? Ah, she can't unmute herself. Anton, are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the next introduction.
Yep, no worries. Margaret can't unmute herself, so I'll go ahead. So I'm Jeff Wellstead. I'm an American living in London for the last 21 years. I have a total of 30 years of experience in human resources with early stage, big multinationals, and then last 21 years, I've been focused on working with hypergrowth tech and startup in tech and biotech companies, building out HR and people strategy from scratch. Big part of my current consulting offering is all about the use of HR technology, specifically AI in HR, to really kind of accelerate and explode the potential, if you will, of the HR organization through very, very cool tools. And so I am now kind of running a 5-week kind of like coaching accelerator course in that space. But that's what I do. And in terms of my top do's and don'ts, I would definitely parrot what I heard earlier with regard to making sure that we focus on a compelling mission and authentic culture. I'm working on with a company right now trying to kind of just chase that thing out. And they initially didn't think that was a big deal, but it turned out to be a really powerful exercise. And the only thing I would say don't do, please, is overpromise, using perks and gimmicks and things of that nature to kind of get top shelf talent to come to your relatively early stage company. What you should focus on instead, I would hope, would be things like cool growth opportunities and very meaningful, powerful, purposeful work. But that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that to all of you. For some reason, I don't know why Margaret can't join us. I think I might have lost her now. Can the others see Margaret, or modern technology was meant to make our life easier and faster?
Yeah, she seems to be there, but she's she can't seem to kind of get unmuted.
No, that's not good.
Oh, here she is again. There we go.
Margaret, let me try and make you again a presenter, and hopefully you can talk. So I think you should now be able to talk. If you try and unmute, this is okay. All right. So who we got? All right, guess all right. I'm really sorry, people. That's modern technology for you. It's meant to make our life easier and faster, but not always the case. So hopefully Okay, so we've got AI note takers. We can't accept them anymore, unfortunately, because some people tend to do some naughty things with them, so we have decided not to accept them. Nevertheless, what we're going to do now, we will go to our next question. Hopefully, Margaret will be able to be audible. I have now made you a presenter again, Margaret, so hopefully you'll be able to talk soon. And when you do, please simply just mention that you want to try and talk, and then we'll give you the mic. So I'm going to put this question in the chat for the team to be able to read it, but I will also read it out loud myself for those of you on the live stream. So this is from a sustainable packaging startup. They're based in London at seed stage. And one of the co-founders is the one who sent the email. It's an industrial designer by background, and he says the problem I'm having is that it's recruiting in a highly competitive niche. How would I find talented engineers with experience in sustainable materials when they're in such high demand across industries? Now, I always say it's nice if we have you here, but since we haven't got you here, or if you are, please do type something in the chat and I'll give you the mic in case there's any follow-ups. So it is quite a generic question. Nevertheless, hopefully our amazing panelists will be able to kind of give us some idea in terms of what happens when dealing with such matters and trying to hire in very highly competitive fields where you probably haven't got the money or obviously neither the brand. So maybe on this we can start with Jeff, then we can go to Sarah, then Lucy, and hopefully Margaret will be able to talk as well at the end. Jeff?
Yep, sure, absolutely. Thanks, Anton. Actually, this is interesting. This is a problem I've run into a couple of times with the very niche companies that I've worked with in the past, especially around sustainability and around things like rewilding projects and replanting projects and all sorts of things. And when you get into sort of the engineering end of it, it really does become very niche, and you realize just how few people, in fact, are kind of in that space. So here are a couple of ideas, or at least things we've done in the past that seem to work. One is tapping into sort of niche communities that are very adjacent to the work that you're doing, and kind of taking on this attitude that there is no such thing as competition when basically resources are scarce and the mission is huge and super important. And so, I kind of always took that tack and even worked alongside people that we typically would look at as being competitors to see if we could kind of co-opt, our talent channels and figure out how to kind of get more people through the pipe because the work was so important. The other thing is kind of like, using, and I know this sounds a bit trite, but using your sort of like particular mission as a magnet to kind of really kind of, get people to start paying attention to who you are, why you matter, and to what degree are you going to be successful in terms of kind of driving forward opportunities. People want to be part of successful enterprises, especially well-funded ones, because those are the ones that typically not only pay better, but importantly get further in terms of the mission itself from a sustainability perspective. The other thing we did a lot of is collaborating with universities and some research centers and governmental bodies that would focus on things like cleaner rivers or clean air or whatever it was, better soil, that kind of a thing. There are a lot of really interesting people that were kind of attached, not as employees, but as advisors to these organizations, but were more than willing to kind of have a conversation about potentially tucking in with a particular venture. So that really kind of helped quite a bit too. But I think, those would sort of be my top three, Anton.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah.
Hi. Yes, I mean, I certainly second a lot of what Jeff has said already. I think certainly thinking about what level of experience or those skills do you need, and maybe bringing in someone who has most of that, but perhaps is also looking for that opportunity to gain some new experience or new skills can also be another way of attracting the right talent. Obviously depends on what stage you're at and how much of a team you've got already, but it's certainly something that I've used in the past where maybe the bias was towards I need someone really senior and experienced, but the reality is actually you can maybe have one or two of those areas covered by someone else, and that opportunity to learn and grow is huge for a lot of people out there. So I think finding new channels to tap into that talent is definitely one way. I think the other thing is it depends somewhat on your offering. So what can you offer in terms of that learning and growth? What can you offer potentially as well in terms of if it's very competitive, maybe not looking to just compete on salary, but are there other things that you can offer either as benefits or as maybe even some equity, depending on how your business is structured. So obviously we can't ask you that question because we're just responding to a question on the chat, but those are the kind of questions that I'd be looking into. What else is it that you could do to attract, aside from, of course, the mission and someone really looking to get aligned to that mission and get that experience and that professional learning and growth. Thanks, Anton.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Lucy?
Yeah, I think great advice there. Where I would sort of perhaps add is look at what you've already got access to. Who do you have in your team already? Perhaps you can tap into some of their networks. Have you thought about looking at fractional talent networks to tap into specific skills that you might need now, where you perhaps can't find the perfect fit for this particular role at this particular stage? What else do you have access to? Are there any investor networks perhaps that you can tap into, get ideas from your investors that might be helpful, and some of the talent leads within those communities who have access to broader communities to be helpful when supporting companies with hiring at that stage? What about your other founder networks? Maybe it might be worth tapping into a few founders in your network who might have looked for similar talent previously and might even be able to recommend people that they've considered in the past. The other thing I would do is look at some of the networks where these talented people are actually communicating. Where are these engineers? Where can you meet them where they are? And try to tap into that talent, find ways of attracting that talent that is a bit more sustainable and longer term, but it's a quick way to tap in and have conversations with people live. And then I'd look at perhaps other recruiter networks and, Talentverse, for instance, which is part of Talentful. They've got a really interesting list of engineers that you can tap into quite quickly through that platform. And there are a variety of other platforms and collectives that perhaps might be useful and lead you to some interesting talent sources. So I would just scan as widely as possible, tap into networks of people that can be useful and quickly get me to the right people and start there.
Thank you very much to all three of you. Margaret, I'm not sure if you've joined by the app or perhaps if you've joined via one of the browsers. I believe the best browser, if you're not using the app, is Google. For this, Google Chrome. If not, you might want to try and join via your phone. But for that, I guess you need, probably the best thing to do would be to have the actual app on your phone. Can you try and see if you can talk now? If not, I will try now, because I just thought I'd try and make you, give you the mic instead of making you a presenter straight away, but probably that's not working either. So I'm going to try one more time. And if not, then you might want to simply download the app and join us through that. Okay, still can't get through to you for some reason. I'm going to read another question that we have. By the way, we are only going to be here now for the next 40 minutes. So for those of you that are tuning in via the live streams, I can see some of you are trying to send some questions. We are unable to monitor your questions there. So please, whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, thank you for tuning in, but unfortunately, we can't interact with you. So if you do want to ask us questions, you'd have to join us here live on Microsoft Teams. The quickest way to do that is to go to our website, startuptoscaleup.club. Find today's session, which is Startup Talent Q&A 157, and you'll see the date there, 9th of June, 12 p.m. Click join. It's a quick registration. That gets you a link to your email. Through that link, then you can join us here on Microsoft Teams. It's audio only, which means you can join from anywhere via any device, platform, normally that is. On the other hand, if your questions today are on talent, please throw them at us, i.e. just drop your question in the chat when you're here in the Microsoft Teams call, and then we'll give you the mic and you can ask our panelists. Questions today can be on anything to do with talent, whether it's how and where to look for people, how to find them, how to convince them, maybe how to interview them, how to test somebody, or how to do a background check, or maybe you want to know how much you should actually pay some people, what kind of benefits to include, or perhaps you're not quite sure about your company culture and all that jazz. There literally are no wrong questions. It's a learning curve for us all. If, however, your questions today are not on talent, then please do save them for the other conversations we run. Mondays, as you can see today, it's normally talent, then Tuesdays, product and tech, Wednesdays, growth, Thursdays, fundraising, second Friday of each month, it's legal, and third Friday of each month, it's finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time, and they're all paneled with some of the best people in our ecosystem, and they're free, but they're only for an hour, and they're audio only. And now, without further ado, I'll read out the second question, and the team here can read it in the chat. So, as the founder of a pre-seed precision agriculture startup in Cambridge, where we create automated soil health monitoring devices for small farms, I realized that any team member's departure could disrupt operations significantly. Without a formal HR team, what steps can we take to identify potential successors within our lean team of agronomists and engineers? Additionally, how can we develop these individuals' leadership and technical skills in a cost-effective way to ensure that critical knowledge is retained as we prepare for future growth? That's an interesting one. Maybe we can start with Sarah, then Lucy, then Jeff, please.
Sure, it is indeed an interesting one. Thank you. I think the first thing I would probably recommend is to consider what are the qualities of being in a people management role. It is a slightly different job to maybe what those people are doing today. And for me, just a few examples of those would be, someone who's got really good communication skills, is collaborative, demonstrates empathy, and is good at problem solving, and ideally some level of decision making, which could obviously be role dependent. And there are assessments out there that you can do to help you to identify some of this. For example, there are some psychometric assessments you can take, which just at least show the level to which someone's preference is more towards those qualities than others. Of course, you can also train and develop someone against some of those skills as well. So as you're thinking about that, then learning on the job is one of the most efficient ways that I've seen to do that. And I would say giving those individuals, once you've identified them, the opportunity to demonstrate these skills through maybe leading a project and asking them to report back on the progress. Who did they involve, and how were they working together? And then you can do a sort of more 360 feedback around that with the other people that have been working on the project as well, all in the spirit of helping that person to develop and grow. Also, mentoring is another great one, whether they're doing some of that maybe externally, and they might be running a group of something in their personal time, which could be showing some of those skills that maybe you hadn't previously uncovered. But you could also give them that opportunity in-house, so maybe helping them to mentor or be a buddy for a new team member that comes on board. And again, it just gives people that opportunity and exposure to something that's maybe not what they're normally doing day to day. Those would be my top 2 tips for this particular one. Back to you, Anton.
Thank you, Sarah. Lucy?
Yeah, I've great ideas there from Sarah. I would add perhaps skills map your organization, understand where you've got skills and where there are gaps. And then really understand from each individual where there's the opportunity for development based on interest areas and perhaps areas where individuals are keen to learn and keen to develop. There are some free resources that you can tap into via things like the Open Org, some great resources on team learning and development there, for instance, that you can pull upon as you have identified those gaps and opportunities for development and really want to lean into developing someone in particular. Mentoring is a great idea. What about things like job shadowing, potentially inspiring people about what might be coming next from a career perspective, really getting them brought in to, you know, what could be next for their careers in the interests of retention, given there's such a niche fit here with this organization in particular. Once you've brought the right people in, you really want to retain them, at least identify those that you want to retain and you want to develop, and really understand where, when you are bringing new talent in, you're really focusing on bringing that talent from. Those would be my top tips.
Thank you very much to all 3 of you. For some reason, Margaret is still struggling to join us, I think. So perhaps we should just carry on with our next questions.
What about me, man?
We don't let men talk here, mate. Go ahead. Sorry about that, dude. I just
love it.
Sorry, it's easy to forget you, buddy.
Yeah, I know. I'm a forgettable character. No, thank you very much. You guys absolutely covered off some really critical stuff, which is super important. And look, I think this is probably one of the biggest threats for any startup to scale up organization, especially when you start to become more successful, is your ability basically to attract people, of course, but retain them, motivate them, and keep them going. And importantly, keep the leadership ranks full of people who are both, as early startups and scale-ups require, are both managers and doers, and can lead by example. One of the things I would probably do, even though A, it sounds a little bit archaic, and B, it feels like you have to have a massive performance management process in place to kind of go do this. You do not. You can even do this anecdotally, but basically try to kind of get consensus across, you know, the top exec team as to this. But draw yourselves up basically some kind of a very simple, dare I say, 9-box grid kind of thing that shows some indication as to who is performing in the best possible way and who is perhaps, you know, kind of a good solid mainstay in terms of being a pillar of decent performance, and then who is struggling. That's, I think, a dimension that's important to always ever keep your fingers on the pulse of. The other thing is to kind of think about the potential somebody may have for leadership. And you can observe, again, a lot of that without getting too scientific. It's always wonderful to have really good psychometric assessments and things of that nature. But even if you have to do this on the fly, you probably already have a sense for who in your organization possesses leadership potential just by their very nature. They may not always ever want to be leaders, though. And that is a big issue, especially in tech companies. So that's the thing to kind of keep tabs on. Start those conversations, coaching conversations early, and absolutely positively recognize those individuals who do show leadership, and praise them for that. Look after them, take care of them. That is a rare combination, along with some of the more sort of techie and scientific sides of things. It's a rare combo, so definitely want to nurture those folks. I love the notion of rotating people around different functions of the organization, as well as rotating people into project leadership, and doing so in possibly a shadow form to see, what people who are particularly good at product leadership look like. and then have that person kind of coach and mentor, the person who's kind of shadowing them. I think that's super important. And something I wish more startup to scale up organizations would do, because without that, then you end up losing huge amounts of institutional knowledge when people do leave, which leads me to the last tip would be documenting processes and workflows. This is a thing that's really big in software world. And I worked for a lot of these types of companies where software developers would leave one day and literally leave with all the secrets locked up into their brains. Because they hadn't documented it or anything. There's some great tools out there. Notion is one of my favorites for being able to do exactly that and make that a requirement, basically, of the work that you're doing, so that you don't lose that critical institutional knowledge when it does, in fact, choose for whatever reason to walk out the door. But those would be sort of my top 3 tips.
Well, thank you very much to you as well, Jeff. Really appreciate that. I think now we can go on to a few more questions. I can see some people trying to message me privately. If there's anything I've learned is that 1, we don't bite here. 2, there's nothing to fear. And I can guarantee you, in terms of you worrying about people stealing your idea, one thing I've learned is that the people that they haven't got the time, and the ones that haven't got, and the ones that have got the time to steal your idea, they don't know how. So please don't feel bad about being worried that people may steal your ideas, and don't feel bad that your question may sound silly, because trust me, there is no such a thing as a silly question when you're trying to run your startup. We're extremely fortunate to have some brilliant people that have been there and done it, and I know for a fact, especially when I've had my own startups, or sometimes when I try and find advisors or fractionals to help the startups I help, is that it ends up costing, if not thousands, at least hundreds of pounds to get this kind of advice from anybody. So if you've got any questions on people for your startup, just drop it in the chat. We'll then give you the mic. You can ask the panelist, and then we'll take it from there. Nevertheless, we can now go to another question. And by the way, for those of you on the live streams, just remember to join us here on Microsoft Teams, because we can't read your questions live on the live streams, whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. What we would be happy for you to do, though, is if you share the news. You see, although we've had about 280,000 people join us in just over 4 years, I think we need all the help we can get to share this news, especially since, since last September, we've changed 3 platforms. So I think the more people know about this, the better it is. So please feel free to share. We'll now read the next question. Okay, solo first-time founder of a health tech startup in Belfast so preparing for Series A, we're creating a platform that provides remote support for physiotherapy patients. With a tight-knit team balancing high-stake projects and customer-facing responsibilities, occasional disagreements have surfaced over work priorities and patient handling protocols. What are some cost-effective approaches to conflict resolution that we could implement to ensure a respectful cooperative environment? Additionally, how can we foster empathy and understanding among team members, especially when different roles have distinct and sometimes conflicting pressures? You're not asking for much, are you? Okay, let's start with Lucy, and then Jeff, and then Sarah, please.
Yeah, these are very common problems. Thank you for such a comprehensive question. I think in terms of effective problem resolution, I think, perhaps some training around having difficult conversations could be quite interesting. But first of all, understanding you know, what is at the heart of these problems? Is there, you know, something where, you know, teams perhaps are working, you know, in silo and perhaps not collaborating as effectively as they could be? Which are the roles that have conflicting pressures and perhaps need a bit more understanding? So I'd probably want to do a bit of work to really understand what's not working, and in parallel look at maybe drawing up some training to support with some learning that might be helpful in resolving some of those issues and helping, you know, drive better communication across the organization. You know, develop some rituals around communication and team collaboration, generally speaking, which might be helpful in resolving some of these issues. And then perhaps think about how you're coming together as an organization. You know, if you're, and you haven't said this, perhaps not always in person in an office environment, there might be ways that you can get together and build relationships, build understanding. You know, can you have teams perhaps present about what they're focusing on a particular week? Do you do, you know, a stand-up regularly with the organization to, you know, make it clear what everyone's working on and perhaps to showcase some moments of success? Because that can be quite a nice way of giving different teams visibility across the organization and having people just understand, you know, what's going on across different teams and where the conflicting pressures are. And it helps to generate collaboration and opportunities for seeing synergies and building relationships. Those would be my tips.
Thank you very much. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks very much for that, Lucy. Yeah, very simple. It's really interesting because this does come up a lot. And look, early days in emerging companies, things get hot quick. People are stressed out. People are probably doing more than one job, at least, if not sometimes 3 jobs simultaneously. Seems like there's fires all over the place. People get stressed out, short fused, rather kind of like nasty with each other, not meaning to. Not because they dislike other people, but they just feel like there's so much pull, excuse me, so much pull on their day-to-day lives and the very short amount of time they have basically to process things quietly in their own heads. It's very simple, frankly, to get rather nasty and short-sighted about things. This is one of those environments, you know, working in sort of a caring type of health tech startup. So I think what you need to do is to kind of normalize, and you need to recognize the fact that this stress exists. It always will. And then what you need to do basically is start putting some kind of some sort of rules, standard operating procedures, or kind of like, you know, kind of structure, if you will, around how it is you do share conflict and detail and actually embrace it as a way of gaining insight into continuous improvement through the insights of your people. And so encourage people to come up and play devil's advocate, encourage people to use real life stories, and be quite clear with folks that, look, we only get better based on the fact that we kind of question each other and make sure that this is okay, or that there may be a better way of doing things. And we absolutely love it. We encourage it, and we want to support that. And the other thing here too is that leaders need to kind of show this stuff day in and day out. The other, you know, in terms of skills around, you know, kind of being disruptive or playing devil's advocate, I think it's important that everybody kind of understands and perhaps gets coached on, you know, notions like empathy and kind of working with each other and being effective at resolving conflict, not in a way that's really going to irritate and wind people up, like, oh, how are you feeling today? And, you know, just like the basic sort of trite, silly, early stage therapeutical stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that, look, this is hard, what we do. We want to do it better than anybody else. So that means we're going to have to push each other and push this business farther and faster than we ever thought possible. That's going to cause stress. We get that. But we're all in this together. This is our mission. This is us together going and winning and making this happen, and importantly, making the world a better place as a result. So what we need to do is push each other always on kind of stress testing, you know, whether or not we've thought things all the way through, and importantly, continuously improve in ways that are not attacking the individual, but are attacking the ideas, and making sure that we kind of go and always ever have the sense that the idea could be better, right? The execution could always ever be better, of course. And always make sure you praise people too for micro wins. That's critical as well. So call the stuff out, recognize it, put some structure around it, help people kind of understand empathically how to deal with it and how to deal with their own stress. And then remind people constantly through your leadership that you're all in this together. You're in this because you're here to make the world a better place as a result of what it is you do. And hopefully that will start to resolve a bit. But that would just be my thinking on it, Anton.
Today you question whether I should slack at 11:15 when I'm about to lose my house and putting in 19 hours a day. But it's a good start. Thank you for that, Jeff.
No worries.
Trying to paint a picture that unfortunately most startups, most founders I come across, they feel that just because it's their baby, it should be everybody's baby. That is a recipe for disaster, especially related to this question. So try and bear that in mind. Sarah, what are your thoughts? What would you do here?
Yeah, well, some really great points there by Lucy and Jeff. I think for me it comes back to also really clearly setting those expectations in terms of, you know, what you are expecting of them up front, in as far as you can actually identify that at that point, because most of these kind of conflicts that you speak of, it tends to be about someone having a different understanding. There could also be some motivation challenge, and that might be a different thing to look at. As Lucy said, working out why it's happening and what are some of the challenges is of course a good first step. But I think for me, what really resonated was sort of additional to what Jeff said around celebrating what good looks like and show and demonstrating sort of by doing, so that people are clear and have the same understanding, and you really can't do that enough. So you said about small wins. I'd also be, you know, here's what good looks like in terms of customer handling, and then you're setting that model for success and showing people, you know, what your expectations are. And I think the other one, again, you referred to it, Jeff, but just a little bit more specific around really having process improvement as an objective. So actively and openly encouraging people to critique what's going on, maybe how teams are you know, working together in these different processes, and encouraging them as a desired behavior that you want to see for them to make it better, and actually being motivated and driven to do that, and that's going to be part of your success. So I think just, you know, just some small things there really that you could do. I think on the final one for me, I'd be remiss without saying that recognizing that there is pressure in this situation. I think also really being open about and considering their well-being, and any support that you might need or want to offer as you move forward, because some of this can also just be about feeling heard, and make people feeling that they are being cared about as well as individuals, and they have kind of their own challenges and things outside of work as well. So just maybe thinking about that and maybe getting some ideas from them on how they might like to see that as well. So that's my 3 key things. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I believe we should have another question after this. Okay, so I'm a founder's associate leading HR at a pre-seed e-commerce logistics startup in Liverpool that has seen unexpected demand for our AI-driven last-mile delivery solution. Our initial growth projections have tripled, putting pressure on our HR capabilities, especially in recruitment and team management. Given our limited resources, what are the most cost-effective ways to scale our HR operations rapidly to support this growth without compromising on team cohesion, onboarding, quality, or compliance? How can we create flexible processes that can grow with us to avoid having to reinvest in restructuring later? This is quite a question, and unfortunately, whilst it is quite extensive, I think it would help to have some specifics. What is it exactly that you're worried about? Or is it just you just want to have some new shiny system out there? So maybe if our amazing team can focus perhaps on some important things to have in place, such as best way to perhaps get your onboarding done, best way to get a few other systems that need to be in place. Maybe we can, we can start with Jeff, and then Sarah, and then Lucy. What would you say is needed here? And do you know any cheap or free ones, Jeff? And
Yeah, no,
go on to the
absolutely.
lady.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Anton. Look, I mean, I've been in this situation so many times and just had to kind of feel my way through it, work my way through it, but kind of finally got to the point where I kind of realized what sort of best practice looks like in this. Poor Margaret, wish she would be here for this because this is right up her street. But having said that, the way I have solved for this notion of doubling and tripling in size at great speed, whilst also not wanting to sacrifice time to hire, cost per hire, quality of hire, and all those important things, and then taking care of people well and competently from an HR operations perspective thereafter, once they sign on the dotted line, has been a couple of things. One is to make sure that you have kind of mapped out the workflow processes and tried to kind of work with those people who are involved in a process. And let's take recruitment as an example. Work with a number of hiring managers and kind of build sort of a very simplistic, design exercise to kind of break up the whole recruitment process into all its constituent elements. And then identify which of those elements basically is not operating optimally. Identify those, then prioritize those in terms of the 3 that you're going to fix as quickly as you possibly can, and just keep going through that list over and over and over again until you get it down. Document the workflows. This is important for the next step, which is you need to find some technology that is going to automate, augment, democratize, and delegate, if you will, authority around people management across the company with good tech that does a great job of capturing things like workflows and actually can automate those things and get you out of the business as an HR person of an early stage company of basically being an HR help desk and being an admin lackey. That's not your job. Your job is to help steer that company from a strategic perspective in the direction it needs to go based on what we know of the people there and their capabilities. And that's no small task. So you need to kind of engage with HR technologies that basically can help you automate a whole bunch of that very competently, document all that stuff, keep good records, and it's still user-friendly and highly adaptable. I used in the past for early stage companies, because primarily they were good and affordable, and also kind of incorporated some AI components too that helped me immensely. A company called Factorial HR, based out of Spain, actually, but is a global system that is very affordable, and they're wonderful to work with, really enjoyable, and have a terrific product. I think they operate in like 140 countries or something like that. So that would be a good sort of like core HR system from which you can then also add on some recruitment modules if you want to, performance management, payroll, a couple of other things. But in terms of things like payroll, I hope it's already the case, but I would outsource that probably via finance through to your accountants, basically, who manage that stuff, because that can be a super cumbersome, very difficult thing to manage and very hard. So I would outsource that. I would log all your processes. I would then try to map that using a tool like Factorial and see if you can automate those processes so that you basically, it's kind of like one-click throughputs, and people are having a wonderful experience as employees, seamlessly going through the workforce automations that you've set up. But importantly, you're getting all the critical information and getting the critical learning done, and people feeling like, okay, cool, this place has got it all plugged in and together. And there's a bunch of other things too, but I want to give everybody else a chance. So thank you.
Hi there. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, totally you nailed a couple of the things that I was going to mention there. So I'll try and sort of add to that or expand to that, because this is quite a big question, as you say. I would agree that having, thinking about documenting and having a system in place has really got to be a priority. It's so much harder to go back and try and put information into a system if you haven't kept it well later down the line when you're scaling, than it is to just make that investment early on at the beginning. So that's definitely time well spent, and a value add investment that hopefully you'll be able to get across the line. I recommend, I've looked at Factorial, that they are good as well. I haven't personally used them, but I'd also recommend HiBob. That's certainly one that I've used in a much smaller startup environment. Very user-friendly, very easy to use, and finance were able to get what they needed from it too. And I would agree, outsourcing payroll, if that is possible, is always a good time saver, for sure. I think it's also about thinking, what can you automate? I know there's a lot of buzz around AI and how to utilize that, but we don't always have all of the capability to even think about where we can integrate some of that. So where you can get help from that with third parties, that's great. Where you can learn a little bit yourself, that's great. But I would even think about something as simple as onboarding is super important, and you do want to make it as personal as you can, but it's easy in a smaller environment to feel you have to be very hands-on and do everything in a very customized way. And the thing is, that's just not going to be scalable moving forward. So I would really recommend looking at that onboarding process as well in some detail, and thinking about how much of that can you document, how much of that can you automate. And by automate, I mean things like, an email, pre-scheduled email pops into the inbox of the person when they start and gives them links to the different areas of things that they need to go figure out, or people they need to connect with, and maybe take the time to record perhaps some information, a presentation or a video. Maybe you've got some value, something like that, that you can actually have pre-prepared. So think about how much you can automate versus then maybe having a small part of it being more hands-on and more customized and more personal, and certainly working with the individual team managers as well. But I think that's a big area of, it's a really important investment, but it's also, can be very time consuming, especially when you're scaling quickly. So those would be the ones that I would really focus on, I think, at this point.
Some nice ideas there, and nice to hear some thoughts around HiBob. They're one of our portfolio companies, and I know a lot of our portfolio founders have used them at early stages and found them to be effective. There are various others. I think the only thing I would add, because you've both done such a great job at that one, is perhaps to think about what you need when choosing your HRIS. Don't get caught up in all the bells and whistles, and think too far ahead. Think about what you really need to solve for now. And in addition to what you can outsource, and what you have then been able to automate, there are so many resources that you can pull on out there to build your basic practices, and to look at what other people are doing in terms of best practice. Things like the Portfolio Collective and various other collectives that exist to help you to build out your people operations processes, and can be a really great way to sort of lift and shift from others that have done it before in the ecosystem, but also to take advice from others at a similar stage of growth that perhaps are going through similar challenges, that can give you great advice. So I would sort of lean on network there as well, in addition to get some further ideas, and to get access to tools perhaps that might be perfect for you at this particular stage.
Thank you very much, all three of you. Quick reminder, we've only got 6 minutes to go, so probably we only have time for one more question. If there's anybody that is already here on Microsoft Teams and you'd like to ask a question, we don't bite. Simply put that in the chat. We'll then give you the mic and you can ask our panelists. In general, for those of you that are following us via the live streams, whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, normally all you'd have to do is go to our website, startuptoscaleup.club, find the session that is live, i.e. today Startup Talent Q&A 157. You click join. It's a quick registration that gets you a link to your email, and through that link you can join us. Our calls are all live audio and audio only, which means we're trying to provide people some flexibility and also inclusivity. Then when you're on the call, you drop your question in the chat, we give you the mic and you can ask the team. But if there is no sort of live questions, what we can do is we can go to our last question. And in the meantime, especially Lucy, who is quite involved from an investor's point of view, I'd love to hear on your parting words at the end, Lucy, some perhaps advice on equity pools for founders, if that's okay, i.e. what do investors like to see at your stage? For example, 8 Roads, it's not extremely early, so you're at an early enough but still kind of a bit mature stage. So what do investors at your stage normally like to see kind of startups having done in terms of their equity pool? I'm talking about employees rather than just founders. But let's go on to the next question. I'll read it out loud for those of you on the live streams. As co-founder of a men's health tech startup in Edinburgh, we're at seed stage where we develop wearable devices for tracking heart health and other men's health challenges. I'm committed to creating a gender balanced and culturally diverse team. However, attracting diverse talent within the technical field has been challenging due to our limited brand visibility. What are some actionable steps we can take to improve diversity within our engineering team, and how can we foster a welcoming, inclusive culture that values all perspectives, even with limited formal support for D&I initiatives? Very good question. I'm sorry we've left this for the end, but we can perhaps start with Sarah, and then Lucy, and then Jeff, please.
Hi. I think actually the answer to this is maybe touching a little bit on what we talked about previously. At least this is what I have found, and that is that where you don't necessarily have the brand visibility, doing a lot of this via networking, really utilizing your own network, it can be really helpful, because you're going to tap into other people's groups and networks, and you're going to be able to have a much broader talent pool from that perspective. And it's a difficult one, because you don't want to kind of, how do you call that out without seemingly calling that out? So I think it's really just getting really crisp around what is it that you're trying to drive, and why are you trying to attract diverse talent, making sure that you're crisp on what your purpose is around that and what you believe is the value that you can bring. And then I think the devil's in the details. So paying really close attention to any job profiles that you're using to list roles, the words that you're using, all of these things can have a big impact on attraction of people from different backgrounds. And there are tools that can help with that, such as Talio is one that I've used, but there may well be others out there as well. But I think really just thinking about anything that you're going out to market with, even if it's word of mouth, just paying really close attention to being as inclusive as possible in terms of your description of your mission and what you do, but also the talent that you're trying to attract.
Thank you. I'll go next. I think this is so important. Culture is something important to get right from day one, and I think you're right to think about this as early as possible, because diversity of thought needs considering from literally the get-go of your organization. Once you're 10 or so employees, it's more challenging to attract diverse talent, and so getting the story right from the outset is, I think, an important way to make sure that you're attracting diversity of thought and really sort of making it clear externally what you stand for as an organization, who you are, what your values are. Maybe start by tapping into your people as well. What encouraged them to join? What's the language that they're saying externally when they're talking to their friends about perhaps joining the organization? who do your top people across the organisation know, and encourage them to think beyond those that went to the same universities and schools as them. For instance, think about, you know, the inclusive networks perhaps that they're a part of. You know, where is your top talent going to come from generally in the future, and how can you get in front of those people and be, you know, telling the right story? I think it's about different perspectives, different backgrounds, as much as it is, you know, people, you know, from all sorts of different walks of life. It's just really making sure that you're telling your story and being very clear about what you're looking for. So I would probably just add that, be mindful of all the opportunities to tap into resources to find that talent, because the sooner you do it, the more successful you'll be with it.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Jeff, and if I can ask all three of you to let me know if you can stay for one more question. Andrew has put one in the chat, and I know it's disrespectful of me to ask you to stay over the agreed time, but if you can, the three of you, just let me know if you can do it. I'd really appreciate it. Jeff?
Yeah, I can stay. It's fine. And I just saw that Lucy said she could as well, so that's cool. Yeah, this diversity thing is, look, it's a tough nut to crack, because I'm kind of against an approach to a policy that says, let's go fix the symptom based, you know, in terms of, you know, we've got this DEI initiative or whatever the initiative is, and so therefore, you know, go make it so, go make it happen, as opposed to kind of addressing sort of the potential root cause kinds of challenges, which I think the, you know, the individual who asked the question hinted at. And I think Lucy and Sarah touched on this, which is you have to do this with intention, which means you need to kind of have an understanding of what problem are you solving here. And I always ever, from a DEI perspective, I always kind of liken this to, look, any organization, if it's smart, will always ever mirror its customer base, and will always ever kind of, you know, kind of attach itself to the sort of personas, if you will, that they're trying to kind of attest. But this is an interesting one because it's a men's health, you know, technical, you know, kind of company. And so, yeah, kind of stacking the whole company full of men who are healthy, as an example, possibly isn't the best way forward. And in terms of people who are going to kind of be part of this effort, I think you still need to kind of mirror the population at large. Again, do so in a way that says, you know, it's not just diversity in terms of skin color, in terms of religion, in terms of race. It is actually diversity in terms of opinion, diversity in terms of perspective, diversity in terms of approach. You want people basically who are going to challenge one another in a hopefully a proactive, positive way to come up with a better, response. You want people who care about, you know, kind of having a positive effect on the folks that you're selling to, the folks that you're engaging with in terms of vendors and partners and so forth. That's really what matters. So kind of like judge people not on the superficial components, but actually on the root cause behaviors that you're basically trying to kind of drive and get to. I could probably go on ad nauseum about this topic because it is involving, but excuse me, just given time, I'll turn it back on the fact that I'm coughing. Sorry about that. Thanks.
No worries, Jeff. Hopefully it's nothing that a decent brandy with some warm tea or hot tea cannot help. Andrew, are you audible? Can you talk? I've given you the mic.
Yes, hi, thanks for that, Anton. I think this question kind of sort of led up from, I actually asked the question before the previous person asked the question with the men's health tech startup that kind of mentions about the fact that they had limited brand visibility. So on that, kind of leading on from there, just wondering how important the panel felt it was for startups and scale-ups to establish some form of employer brand in order to help attract talent.
Very good point. And would you like to quickly introduce yourself, Andrew?
Yes, my name is Andrew. I'm a founder and director of Inspire People. It is a bit of a loaded question, admittedly, because part of what my consultancy does is employer branding. So hands up.
Fair enough. That was a smart bit of advertising. We do have a rule here that when people try to advertise through their questions, they got to pay 1 Bitcoin to our panelists. I'm joking. Let's quickly go to Lucy, Jeff, and then Sarah, please.
So I think your brand is so important when it comes to attracting top talent. Really, really important point. Thanks for bringing this up. And I think going back to some of the things we were saying earlier around, messaging, founder story, a lot of that story comes from the founder, and then will pervade across the organization. The first 10 or so hires tend to come from, your founding team's network, and then, it sort of pervades from there. And that, if you've got it right, at least, that sense of vision will continue to hopefully live on in the future hires that you continue to make as you start sort of looking beyond Series A, etc. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, it matters hugely, and I think it starts with the founders' messaging and being very, very clear on their vision for creating the organization, and really making sure that they are emphasizing that story and mission at every opportunity when having conversations with talent. And I think probably those first 10 to 15 hires should all be made by the founder, and the founder should be involved in that messaging very, very closely, and making sure that that message is getting to the first initial hires that you make. And then as the company get to that point where they are fundraising for Series A and starting to scale, that message will start to evolve and become part of your leadership team's language. So I think it starts with the founder being very, very clear around vision and taking every opportunity to really drive that into every conversation that they're having with talent that they're trying to attract.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Sarah? Or Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I mean, you absolutely nailed it, Lucy. There's no doubt about it. That's fantastic. Yeah, look, employer brand, I've always ever been a massive advocate about this. Having worked with, like I said, something like 16 companies who've done this, who are complete unknowns, and yet are kind of suddenly wanting to dive into this huge red ocean of competition against people who have been there, incumbents that have been there for years and have established themselves in a variety of different ways. So the question then begs, not just do we have a brand, but is the brand competitive? Is the brand going to be able to turn heads, get people to basically stay on the phone for our recruiters, to actually go through a recruitment process and want to learn more and want to be a part of this incredible mission we're doing? What gets people to do that stuff? And the things that get people to do that stuff is kind of, dare I say, it's kind of like mind crack. It's this notion that you're getting inside somebody's head and saying, in a subtle way, I bet what you're doing now isn't what you dreamed you thought you were going to be doing many moons ago when you joined this organization. I bet you feel stuck. I bet you feel like you're not necessarily going to get that big break that you'd hoped for. And even though you might work alongside some really wonderful people, I bet you basically want more opportunity and more to have more impact and to really kind of change the world in a positive way. And basically, that's what you then need to build your brand around, and not just employer brand, but just the brand, period. The brand to your customers, the brand to your vendors, the brands to your partners, and the brands to your employees should be all the same thing. This is what we're looking to change in the world, our massive transformative purpose. We are dead serious about this, and this is how we're going about doing that. These are therefore the kind of people we need, and these people are special, and they're powerful, and they're amazing, and we have loads of them here, and we take brilliant care of them, and we look after them, and they look after each other. And we also have incredible management and leadership, and we also have incredible opportunities to grow and expand and thrive here. Impact is everything for us. You start talking like that to people, and you mean it, and you got to back it up with your behavior day in, day out, then you're going to start attracting some really special people. So yeah, really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing this. I suspect it's really powerful work that you do in this space, but it is not to be overlooked. This isn't a marketing thing. This is an essentials, existential thing that you have to get done right. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Sarah, please.
Thank you. Thanks for those great points, both Lucy and Jeff as well. I think when you're saying it's not a marketing thing, I think often people associate brand with marketing and with maybe some sophisticated form of marketing team. And I think often that is the case in some organizations. But I think for me that the bit of that that's probably useful is thinking about what you do and who your customer is. And where I've seen this be quite successful is even thinking about your employer branding is can be quite persona led. So, what are you trying, who are you trying to attract? If you're looking at, for example, technical roles and engineers, that might look slightly different to what how you might position yourself when you're talking to salespeople or when you're talking to, I don't know, finance people. So I think thinking about some of the different nuances that has, whilst having an overarching clear value proposition around, what are the values, what are the core values that you stand for in your organization, as Jeff was touching on there. And I think for me, it's about that alignment and making sure that what you're doing and saying internally is also reflected in what you're doing and saying externally, because there is a very close link between customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. So the more that you can get that alignment, and particularly early on, I think the better. Where I've seen, I had an example of this in one company where we didn't have customers, so I was a little bit flummoxed as to what to do, and I focused very much on employee experience, which again, Jeff, some of the examples you were giving there are really very closely tied to that as well, and are being really led by the individuals that we had in that business for me to identify what does that experience look like? Why are they, willing and wanting to work there? And some of that was quite surprising to me and wasn't what I'd expected when I took on the role. So just sometimes some of that, richness and goodness comes from the people that you have already and helping them to effectively identify what that employer value proposition looks like. So get everyone involved would be my advice, and then promote it as much as you can.
Here, thank you very much. Hope you found that helpful to your cause and what you do, Andrew.
Yes, thank you ever so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome and best of luck. We are now 12 minutes over the line, which is way longer than what I normally do. So apologies, panelists. How about some parting words? Let's start with Jeff, then we'll end with the ladies. So Jeff, Sarah, and then Lucy, please.
Yeah, parting words. I would just say that, look, this is a tough thing that you're doing as a founder of a company. There is nothing easy about this, and I know this because I'm one myself. But I don't have loads of employees that I have to look after. I'm sure your lives are a lot more complicated. Make sure you give yourself some good self-care. And what I mean by that is give yourself headspace. Go find places to kind of crawl into where you're not going to be disturbed day in and day out. Learn techniques like meditation. Use apps like Calm and Head Clear or Headway rather, and a couple of others, whatever works for you. And go find something else in addition to what you're doing today that really floats your boat, that really kind of like acts as sort of like a 30-minute release, at least once a week, and just give your brain room to grow and room to think and room to calm itself, is all I would say. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to whoever else.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Sarah.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I would also add to that as just starting out myself, sort of with my own company. I think don't feel alone, and don't be alone. One of the things that someone shared with me many years ago was about having a personal board, and I've really drawn on that more recently. So sometimes you might be in a situation you think, oh, but I don't have a person who does that, or I don't have that particular skill. For me, sometimes it might be finance. And I think, who do I know? Who do I know in my network? More importantly, that I can trust, who maybe in exchange for a coffee might be able to help me with that or give me that information. So I appreciate networking. We talked a lot about networking today, and it can be incredibly valuable, and definitely really good to sort of get your company out there as well. But I also appreciate that sometimes you don't want to share everything out in the public or with people that maybe you don't know so well. So really think about that personal board. Who are the 2, 3, 4 people that you could really call on if needed in any given situation, because it can feel like a lonely job that you're doing, and it doesn't need to be. So that would be definitely my parting words. Thank you.
Great tips from you both there.
Sarah.
Yeah, network is so important. I completely agree with what you just said, Sarah. And, maybe a coach and mentor, someone that can guide you through when days are harder than ever. And you just need to remind yourself why you're on this journey. You asked me, Anton, to allude to what investors look for from an equity perspective. So I'll really
It would
quickly wrap
help
up with some
if
of
you
that.
can add anything on that. I'm sorry, I know I left it
No
last.
worries. No worries. And look, reach out if there's anything else I can help with. But generally speaking, I call on people like equity people for advice on equity. And I think there's no one size fits all with equity. I think what investors are generally looking for is a philosophy around compensation and equity framework that has been thought through. Typically, your first 10 to 15 employees will be those, who have been allocated the highest pool, largest chunk. And then once you cross the 50 employee mark, you're in ESOP world, and we'll have some form of stock ownership program that goes to your remaining employees. It's such an important tool for, both attracting talent, but also retaining great talent. And it's so important to get it right. So I think having a philosophy around compensation as early as possible is really, really critical. And as part of that, get your equity frameworks right. Don't risk your business by giving too much away, but also be very, very clear around your frameworks and your philosophy around compensation and equity. Take advice from experts. There's some great people out there, people like Alistair Fraser at Justly, who's brilliant on the compensation side, equity people, Speller and team I've worked with on a number of occasions. They're very, very clued up on all things equity and can give you very specific and sound advice that you can tailor to your own personal needs.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you to all of you that tuned in today, and especially those that did it via Microsoft Teams here. We are 17 minutes over the line now. This was Startup Talent Q&A, perhaps London Tech Week's best Startup Talent Q&A. So just a quick reminder, we run 6 regular sessions: Mondays talent, Tuesdays product and tech, Wednesdays growth, Thursdays fundraising, second Friday of each month it's UK startup law, and third Friday of each month it's UK startup finances. They're normally all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time, and you can RSVP to any of them via our website, startuptoscaleup.com. And actually, when you go there, please feel free to join our WhatsApp community. We've got groups of founders, investors, and operators. You've got a WhatsApp icon at the top and bottom of our site. By the way, this week, because we are doing these in collaboration with London Tech Week, our legal and finance Q&A will both be on Friday, this Friday. Our legal one will be at 11, and our finances Q&A would be at 2 p.m. So feel free to register either via our site or London Tech Week's site. As far as London Tech Week is concerned, I'll be heading back to Olympia and should be there within a couple of hours. And then in the evening, although unfortunately I've only gone and registered myself to 5 events, it looks like I'll only be able to make the Rising Stars announcement by Tech UK at the BBC in the evening. So if anybody wants to say hi, please do feel free to reach out via LinkedIn. And with that in mind, hopefully we'll see you all for Startup Product and Tech Q&A tomorrow at 12 p.m. Huge thanks again to our panelists, Sarah, Lucy, and Jeff. And apologies that we couldn't get Margaret's tech to work. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, and God bless you all. Bye bye for now.